Assalamu alaikum and good morning, my dear students. How are you all? Hope you are doing well. So I welcome all of you to yet another class of biology. So what we have learned in the previous class, we learned about plant tissues, right? So we learned about different types of plant tissues based on their functions. Is it? So today we are going to discuss about animal tissues. What is animal tissues? We know that in animals also there are different types of tissue based on their functions they perform. Based on the functions they perform, there are different types of tissues in the animals. So in the previous chapter you learned about different types of cells, right? In animals, like a nerve cell, then fat cells, blood cells, muscle cells, etc. Is it? So these kind of cells are present in these different tissues. For example, you know that muscle tissue. This muscle tissue will help in the movement of our body, right? The muscle tissue, that is the muscle cells present in the muscle tissue, will help in the contraction and relaxation of the muscle cells, and which will result in the movement of our body. And what about blood cells? Blood cells will form the blood tissue, which will help in the transport of materials, food materials, oxygen to different parts of the body, and also they will collect the waste materials from different parts of the body, and they will give it to kidney and liver for the disposal. Is it? So based on the functions, there are different types of tissues. So we can say that the blood tissue is an example for connective tissue. Okay, so there are mainly 4 types of tissues in animals. There are mainly 4 types of tissues in animals. They are, first one is epithelial tissue, then second one is connective tissue, then muscular tissue, and last finally nervous tissue. Okay, so these are the 4 different types of tissues present in the animals. So in today we will look into these tissues in detail. Okay, we will discuss it in detail. So all of you please carefully listen the class. First we will discuss about the epithelial tissue. Epithelial tissue are the covering or protective tissues in the animal body. And this epithelium covers most of the organs and cavities within the body. It also forms a barrier to keep different body systems separate. And this epithelial tissue have a great role in the exchange of materials between the body and the external environment, and also between different parts of the body, because anything entering or leaving the body must cross at least one layer of epithelium. That's why it has a great role in the exchange of materials. And the epithelial tissue cells are tightly packed to form a continuous sheet. That means there will be no intercellular spaces between the epithelial tissue cells. And regardless of the type of the epithelial tissue, all the epithelium will be usually separated from the underlying tissue by an extracellular fibrous basement membrane. Okay, so these are the characteristics of epithelial tissue. And this kind of epithelial tissue can be seen in the skin and in the lining of our mouth, the lining of blood vessels, then lung alveoli, kidney tubules, etc. And all these are made up of epithelial tissue. Now let's look at different types of epithelial tissue. So epithelial tissue are different types based on the functions, and the structures are also different based on the functions. First type is squamous epithelial tissue. So squamous epithelial tissue consists of a layer of thin flat cells. This kind of tissue is present in the linings of blood vessels, lungs, mouth, esophagus, etc. And since it is a thin layer of flat cells, they are called simple squamous epithelial tissue. Simple squamous epithelium. Okay, so next we have stratified squamous tissue. What is the specialty of this? You know that our skin, which protects the body, is also made of squamous epithelium. but the epithelial cells are arranged in many layers to prevent the wear and tear. Since they are arranged in a pattern of layers, that means in different strata, the epithelium is called a stratified squamous epithelium. So, there are two types of squamous epithelial tissue, simple squamous epithelium and stratified squamous epithelium. Simple squamous epithelium was only in one layer. There was a thin layer of cells, but in the case of stratified squamous epithelium, there were layers of cells. Layers of squamous tissue were arranged in different strata. That's why it is called a stratified squamous epithelium. Next type of epithelial tissue is columnar epithelial tissue. This tissue consists of tall pillar-like cells. Columnar means pillar-like. So this kind of tissue consists of tall pillar-like cells and it is present in the walls of intestine. And in the case of respiratory tract, also the columnar epithelial tissue is present. But there is a difference. In the respiratory tract, there will be hair-like projections called cilia. Okay, so there will be some hair-like projections called cilia in the columnar epithelial tissue. That's why this tissue is called ciliated columnar epithelial tissue. Understood? So there are two types. First one is columnar epithelial tissue, which will be consisting of tall pillar-like cells, and it will be present in the walls of intestine. And in the ciliated columnar epithelial tissue, this will be present in the respiratory tract and some hair-like projections will be seen in the epithelial tissue. Okay. And this ciliated columnar epithelial tissue, the cilia present in this tissue will help to move the mucus present in the respiratory tract and in order to clear that mucus. Next type is cuboidal epithelial tissue. So this type of tissue consists of cube-shaped cells. From the name itself you can understand that is it consists of cube-shaped cells and which will form the lining of kidney tubules and ducts of salivary gland, where it provides the mechanical support to these tissues. Okay. So cuboidal epithelial tissue are cube-shaped cells and which will provide mechanical support. And sometimes epithelial tissue folds inwards and forms a multicellular gland which secretes substances. And this kind of tissue are called glandular epithelium. Okay, this is another type of tissue and it will be seen in some times only. Okay, so that is called a glandular epithelial tissue. And this epithelial tissue will fold inwards and forms a multicellular gland which secretes substances. That's why it is called a glandular epithelium. So these are the different types of epithelial tissue. Next we will look at the connective tissue. So connective, from the word itself you can understand that it will connect something, right? So connective tissue means connecting two different tissues or more than two tissues. Okay, so there are different types of connective tissue like blood, bone, tendon, ligament, then cartilage, areolar connective tissue, then adipose connective tissue, etc. So unlike the epithelial tissue, the cells of connective tissue are loosely spaced and it will be embedded in an intercellular matrix. And this matrix may be like jelly-like, fluid, dense or rigid, and the nature of this matrix will be according to the function of that particular connective tissue. So first we will discuss about the blood connective tissue. So you know that blood has a fluid matrix called plasma, in which the red blood cells, white blood cells, that is white blood corpuscles and platelets are suspended. And this plasma contains protein, salts and hormones. You know that the function of blood, that is blood flows and transport gases, digested food, hormones and waste materials to different parts of the body. Is it? So bone is the another type of connective tissue. You know that our body the structure to our body is given by the bones, right? It forms the framework that supports the body, and it also anchors the muscles and supports the main organs of our body, right? All the main organs, internal organs, are supported by the bone, and it is a strong and non-flexible tissue. Is it? We can't fold our bones, right? So they are non-flexible tissue. Unlike the blood connective tissue, bone cells are embedded in a hard matrix, and that will be composed of calcium and phosphorus compounds. Okay. Next one is ligaments. So two bones can be connected to each other by another type of connective tissue, which is called a ligament. And this tissue is very elastic, but it has considerable strength, but it is very elastic. But these ligaments contain very little matrix and connect bones and bones. What is? Ligaments connect bones and bones, which will help in the movements of the bones. Okay, the bones and bones are connected by ligaments, and it will help in the movements. Next one is tendons. Tendons will connect the muscles to the bones and are another type of connective tissue. Tendons are fibrous tissue which have great strength, but they have limited flexibility. The ligaments were highly flexible, but the tendons have limited flexibility, and tendons will connect bone to muscles. Next type of connective tissue is cartilage. Cartilage has widely spaced cells, and the matrix is composed of proteins and sugars. Okay, cartilage smoothens bone surface at joints and is also present in the nose, ear, trachea and larynx. You can see the cartilage in your ears. We can easily fold our ears, right? It is because of the presence of cartilage in the ears. Next type of connective tissue is areolar connective tissue, which is found between the skin and the muscles, around the blood vessels and nerves, and in the bone marrow. This will fill the space inside the organs and support the internal organs and helps in the repair of tissues. The last one is adipose tissues. Adipose tissue is found below the skin in order to store our fat. Okay, so adipose tissue is found below the skin and between the internal organs too. And it contains fat and it helps to store fat. Next type of tissue is muscular tissue. This muscular tissue will help in the movement of body. Okay, so movement of muscles is due to the contraction and relaxation of muscle cells, right? So it will help in the movement of body. So it consists of elongated cells called muscle fibers, and this contains a protein called contractile protein which contracts and relaxes and helps in the movements. So you know that muscles which can move under our will are called voluntary muscles, right? So muscles which do not move under our will are called involuntary muscles. Is it? So there are voluntary muscles and involuntary muscles. Voluntary muscles means which will move under our will. We can control that movement. But involuntary muscles, we can't control the involuntary movements, that is caused by the involuntary muscles. So there are mainly three types of muscles. First one is striated muscles. These are the voluntary muscles and which have the light and dark striations. That means if we are observing these type of muscle cells under the microscope, we can see light and dark bands. If we are properly studying these muscle cells, we can see light and dark bands, or we can say striations. That why it is called striated muscles. Okay, the cells will be long, cylindrical, and it will be multinucleated. Multinucleated means more than one nuclei will be present. And they are also called skeletal muscles. That means striated muscles are also called skeletal muscles because they are attached to the bones, and they will help in the voluntary movements of our body. Okay, so this is about the striated muscles. Next type of muscles is the unstriated muscles, or These are the involuntary muscles which have no striations, and the cells are long and spindle shaped, and it will be uninucleated. Spindle shaped means both the ends will be tapered. Okay, both the ends will be having tapering end. Okay, so the cells will be long, spindle shaped, and are uninucleated. There will be only one nucleus. So they are present in the alimentary canal, blood vessels, bronchi of our lungs, iris of our eye, etc. And they will help in the involuntary movements. Okay, so next type of muscle is cardiac muscles. From the word itself you can understand they are also involuntary muscles, and they will have some striations. Okay, the cells will be long, cylindrical in shape, branched and multinucleated. So the cardiac muscles are also long, they are cylindrical in shape, will be branched and multinucleated, and they are present in the heart and helps in the contraction and relaxation of the heart. Okay, so these are the three different types of muscle tissues. The last type of tissue is the nervous tissue. Nervous tissue helps to carry messages from one part of the body to the other and will respond to the stimuli. Stimuli means any external factor that make us to respond. For example, if we touch a hot pan, we will withdraw our hands. So the heat in the hot pan is the stimuli which make us to respond, that is withdrawing of our hands. Okay, so stimuli is any factor that make us to respond. So nervous tissue helps to carry the messages from one part of the body to other and respond to the stimuli. So it is found in the brain, spinal cord and nerves. And this nervous tissue consists of nerve cells, or they are called neurons. Okay, so if you are looking at the structure of a neuron, that is nerve cell, they have a cell body. The nerve cell have a cell body containing a nucleus and a cytoplasm. And from the cell body, there are some hair-like structures projecting outside. They are called dendrites, and there will be a long part from the cell body. They are called axon. Okay, and axon will end in the nerve endings. The axon has a protective covering called a myelin sheath. It is a protecting covering around the axon. The neurons will join together to form nerve fibers. And the signal or the message that passes along the nerve fiber is called nerve impulse. And this nerve impulse allows us to move our muscles when we want to. Okay, this nerve impulse will pass the message and make us to move our muscles when we want to move it. So this is about the 4 different types of tissues, animal tissues. That is, first one was epithelial tissue, then second one connective tissue, then third one muscular tissue, and fourth one was nervous tissue. So dear students, in today's class we discussed about what all things? We discussed about different types of animal tissues. So there are mainly 4 types of animal tissues. First we discussed about the epithelial tissue, right? In epithelial tissue it is again classified into 3. That is squamous epithelial tissue, then cuboidal epithelial tissue, then what was it? The columnar epithelial tissue, right? And the squamous epithelial tissue, there are 2 types, that is simple squamous epithelial tissue and stratified squamous epithelial tissue. Then in the columnar epithelial tissue, there was a special type of epithelial tissue, that is ciliated columnar epithelial tissue, which was present in the respiratory tract. And there was cuboidal epithelial tissue and a special case, that is glandular epithelial tissue. Okay, next we discussed about the connective tissues, which are of different types like blood connective tissue, bone, then ligaments, tendons, cartilages, then areolar connective tissue and adipose tissue. Next we discussed about the muscular tissue, right? Muscular tissues are of 3 types, that is striated muscles, then non-striated or smooth muscles and cardiac muscles, and finally about the nervous tissue. So I hope that all of you have understood the topics. If you have any doubt, we will be clearing it in the live classes. Okay, that's all. Thank you.